All right. Hey, welcome everybody. It's Wednesday, May 4th. May it be with you, I suppose. This is the Meshery development call. We have it once a week. Meshery is a CNCF project. We follow the code of conduct of the CNCF. So keep your French to yourself today, or your swear words to yourself. And treat each others with respect, if you would. If you're on the call, please drop your name into the meeting minutes. It's nice to have a record of who's attended. At the end of every week, we draw from a raffle. I think the pot is up to $700 at this point. We just send out gift cards. So if you haven't gotten yours yet, you just haven't gotten picked from the raffle. Okay. There's a lot of sarcasm that also flows around this community. So that was some sarcasm for you. Did everybody get their name in? There's a few people that might not. If you don't have your name down, then I just assume you're here as something of a bystander, and that's okay. Although we encourage everybody to get their hands dirty. Put your fingers on the keyboard. Get meshy. Okay, on that, we're a little ways into the meeting. Let's get rolling. The first topic. So my name's Lee, by the way. I'm one of a number of maintainers here. There's a number of other maintainers on the call. Anybody new on the call for the first time? Yeah. And so for Shabazz and Rohit, I think both of you have been on this call in the past, or Rohit, is this your first time by chance?
No, I've been in this call last week.
Last week. Okay, very good. Oh, that's right. I remember your voice now.
Yeah.
Nice. Good. Okay, so the first topic was with Uzair. This has to do with with some changes that he was making inside of Meshery's user interface. Last week, I had just kind of recapped his efforts here, because he's committed to a few things, working on a few items in Meshery, but Uzair himself, he's got he's in school and his school is offline now. So that he's got time conflict, which will end shortly. He'd been working on helping bring forth some additional troubleshooting tools. So one of those is, if you haven't seen it yet, is there's a new button called Reset Database in Meshery's UI. This has the effect of doing, eliminate. Meshery has a local database on disk, on file. It's a SQLite database at the moment, which is just a collection of files. There is the occasional corruption that might happen, or there's the occasional set of cached information that maybe you want to flush, or for whatever reason you might want to reset the database. So he's brought forth this tool. At the moment, there's actually an open need here that I'll write into the meeting minutes. If you're a user, you're running Meshery, you click this, good. It does what it says it does. It did that accurately. There are two issues here. Does anyone know what the first issue might be with this behavior? Usually like on deletion of something, or on kind of a negative mutation of something, you should probably prompt the user to say, are you sure? Or did your finger have a random click of the mouse? Or did your cat walk over your mouse and reset your database for you? You probably wouldn't want that. And your cat might hit the mouse button and your enter key in answering and confirming, but that's unlikely and not our fault. It is our fault, though, if we do significantly detrimental things to your deployment like this, and we don't double check with you, or we don't let you know what's really going to happen behind this. So there's a second request. So I'm calling out these requests for those that are on the call that might do one of two things. The first thing you might do is open an issue to describe the need for a user prompt. Just we have a standard modal in Meshery UI that can be used. It's a React, it's an MUI, material UI modal that can be used to just ask the question. Part of the question that can be asked is can include a description of what's going to happen. And that's the second thing that needs to be done. And this could be the same person, but is to include an info button adjacent to the reset database button. Anybody, any volunteers? Any volunteers? Anybody?
Yeah, I'll make an issue of it for it.
Oh, nice. All right. Thank you, Subedi.
Also, there can be a little bit much fine-grained control over the deletion process because we have a lot of things set in we use the same SQL file and the same instance to save a lot of things. So for example, we give users patterns, filters, and applications out of the box. So, and you have other data like your objects from your clusters, they're also saved in the same database. So if it was a little bit fine-grained that you want to delete this and not that, it would be little helpful if they don't want to reset. So there can be an option to reset the entire thing or just reset the mesh sync database. Yeah, kind of like flush mesh sync button.
Nice. Or, yeah, nice. Okay, good. Or maybe instead of multiple buttons, to Ashish's point, that maybe it's when someone presses the button, they get a modal that asks for their confirmation, but included inside the modal is like a set of checkboxes to like flush everything or reset everything, or maybe just certain segments of the database, like Ashish was saying. Yeah, what do you think about that, Ashish?
Yeah, that seems pretty intuitive.
So Subedi, can I hand this over to you to kind of fill in what we just said about checkboxes and things?
Yeah, okay. But the inside this everything is inside the model, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. All right. Anybody have comment on that last? Any other comment? Moving on, Pranav, you've been working on, well, a couple of things.
Yeah. And today I was talking about the static board for performance testing. So recently I made a PR about how to bring back those static board results, which includes the name of the host machine, CPU, memory, and other things. So then there was an ask for making it in the form of charts, which like I'm currently working on it. It's not complete yet, and I had a question about the pagination problem. Like how should we make it into a page, or it's not currently to be implemented? Like tables are understood, but like page also needs to be added for that.
Yeah. Yeah, if you, oh man, sorry, I've got an Alexa on the wall who won't shut up. So yeah, if anybody has suggestions, bring those up. For my part, if you go to that mockup that's there with the black tabular. Okay, so for context for everyone, when a user runs a performance test, they're immediate, once the test is done, they're displayed the results of the test, which looks similar to this graph. They can also come back many days later and recall these same results. So they'll pull up a modal that has the statistical analysis. Pertinent context to the analysis of the results is an understanding of what type of environment the test was run in. Is this a 4,000 node cluster or a 2-node cluster? And how beefy were the nodes and all of that stuff. Those are all pertinent to and affect the performance test. So understanding that there might be 0 nodes. They might not even been running the test on a cluster. They might have been testing an external URL like this test was doing. It was actually testing layer5.io. So there may be any number of records, any amount of information to display to the user. And so understanding that, incorporating paginate, like a tabular format for displaying information about the number of nodes makes, I think, a lot of sense. Incorporating pagination into that makes a lot of sense to the extent that you could have hundreds of nodes. This I think this is actually a mock-up, right? This mock-up probably works well if you just paginate after 10 records, and there might be something more clever, but
like we can also use the charts which we I'll show. For example, the charts which we use here, we can use similar kind of that. Yes. We can use something like this which we are using here.
Nice. Yeah. And I think Gaurav is probably pointing out that very same thing, that which is nice because they come with a few, they come with some of those, the ability to search, the ability to filter on columns, the ability to sort columns, the ability to, yeah.
A little more work is left. It would be complete by today.
Oh, that's nice. The one thing that might, well, it probably won't. Like if you can imagine, like if you put yourself into the position of the user in this case, and you imagine the context in which they're looking at a given performance report, they can access that either here by clicking on the chart icon. And if you do that, so it brings open the modal, which is what was pictured in the, so there's this, and if tagged on, if what's the right word? I guess tagged on doesn't sound right. Anyway, if you join to the bottom of the modal, that same another table, the user is certainly seeing that additional information in context of the results. And it is result specific. So it's specific to that result set, because even though they ran multiple performance tests, something in the environment may have changed. I was just trying to quickly think whether or not the user would get lost in like trying to navigate the chart, which is kind of intense itself, and then a bunch more info. Like an alternative approach to this would be a multi-tabbed modal in which,
I was also thinking that there should be a way so that we can switch this current page and get the nodes in a new page, like maybe an arrow button here, something like that.
Yeah, like a carousel. Probably, I would submit to you that's probably less intuitive, but yeah, that to your point, and Mario probably has a perspective here, but to your point, there's quite likely information overload if we're not having these two things mutually exclusive, or like the display of them being mutually exclusive. Yeah, Mario, did you have a thought?
Yeah, just curious. Is there a way to kind of compare two results together? That's like a really desirable feature, and it's been, um, for example, um, JMeter, other tools, even like the Azure Load tool. I believe that the Azure one at one point showed that before they got like deprecated their tool. So I don't know. It's something worthwhile. Like, is that like supported today? Does anyone know?
Pranav, I'll let you.
Yeah, comparison is supported right now. Like right now, you can see I can compare results.
Wow, that's great. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
see it.
already there.
Awesome. That's really good.
You can just select the number of results you want to compare, and then you can click on this button, and it will compare everything.
Wow, this is
On
great.
that, yeah, on that subject, so maybe the node details, the Kubernetes environment details, maybe those just wouldn't be available in comparison mode because it's just kind of a lot to.
Those are not available in this model. They are only available in the result model.
Okay. Now, there's one other place
Well,
to
I mean,
give.
one other place.
To give consideration to the display of environment information. Pranav, if you were to go to the SMP item on your menu on the left-hand side, just the high level performance page. So like 4 items up, like right in the middle, actually. So 2 more. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yep. That the other place that people can recall performance tests is on this calendar, which isn't displaying properly at the moment for Pranav. But if you click on that 04 Wednesday, like there was a performance test run. If you want to recall the details, you can click on the calendar entry and it'll display the graph again. And so, you know, in either situation, we should be able to show the user the same details.
Okay.
Any other comments on this? Or Pranav, anything we missed on this?
No, everything is covered.
And Pranav, since you have the ball, is there any other work that you'd like to speak to?
No, currently I'm focusing on this graph only right now.
Okay. Okay, very good. Moving along. Somebody can help me take some notes here, maybe about the outcome of what we just said. You know, supporting pagination using the MUI table data tables. But moving along, is Alpha on the call? Well, I think he sent a note saying he wasn't going to be able to make it today. Is that right?
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. No, there he is.
I didn't say that, Lord.
Yeah,
All
no,
right.
that was for the other call, yesterday's call.
Yeah. All right. Okay, I will share my screen.
All right.
Not this one. All right. Okay. So for the recap, I have been working on a PR which is related to the documentation or the generation of the Meshery CTL docs so that the users need not to create a customized or new markdown files from scratch, whereas the Cobra CLI library can take care of itself and you just need to type the code like go run docs.go, and it will automatically generate the documentation for you on your behalf. So that's what I'm working on for like more than 2 weeks. And the final output uh, is almost ready, like almost fixed the routing issues and all. So this is just the final output of the documentation on how it look like. So for long story short, like if you ask like how these details are fetched, it all depends upon the Meshery CTL files content. So if you go to on to the Golang files and check the content, there will be a separate like synopsis and for examples. It will fetch the content from there, and there it will be rendered. So this and all, it's all customized. Since the Cobra CLI has an inbuilt template, but it's not suitable to our fashion. So I just had to remodify it, and this is the output. So um, my question is, Lee, you were saying that after the comparison, like, is this accurate description or not? Could you rephrase the question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Hey, it looks good. It's great work, by the way. I think you're this close. And by the way, Aditya, when you're done with this, if you you should write a blog post on this, because you've
Yeah,
taken
sure.
this. I mean, you think of the phases that you've taken this through. It's a pretty interesting evolution. Yeah, there's if just using Meshery CTL system start as an example, I think it's a good example. It's the only one that I actually looked at. Any number of us have, have taken time in the past to write out specific examples of how to use it and when to use it and its behavior and things like that. And so this is the proposed format and set of information that Alpha is working through. If you were to bring up the current documentation, which is, it's linked inside of the meeting minutes, or you can just bring up the, were we able to capture all the same information in the new form?
Yeah, almost. But the only factor is that if we change the content present in the Meshery CTL files, that would reflect in the Meshery CTL as well, both in the documentation as well as the CLI app.
Cool.
That would be the
So-
output.
Okay. So I'd love to hear from other folks, and you all can express an opinion on this and are qualified to, because you're all users of software, and some of you make this software in specific Meshery CTL. Here, I'll submit to you that this proposed form, to me, looks like what it is, which is dynamically generated, programmatically generated documentation, which, unless I'm looking at an API reference, I kind of despise, because I feel like, well, I should just be exploring the CTL anyway and not even reading through the docs. Like, they're a waste of my time, because I'm going to now have to switch context back over to the CTL, and then I'm going to get the same info there anyway. I might be duped into thinking I'm getting additional info. If you go to the current form of the docs, just by the fact that there's different formatting, where it's saying, here's an example, and then there's a human written description. Well, it's obviously human written both ways, but but a curated description of the behavior and use of a given form of this command. I feel like, just by formatting, I feel like there's insights being imparted, and it's worth my while to read these examples, as versus just go play with the CTL and read the examples there. But I don't know if anyone else feels that way, or if, as a second follow-up question, how difficult it is to just add some formatting of the comments.
In order to achieve the description as like this one, it may be a bit difficult. We may need to hard code them. That's what I'm afraid of for now.
Say more if you would. By the way, we should never lowercase Meshery. But
Yeah,
say
I
more.
will do.
How about
Okay.
changing the color of the font? If we can use a different, is that possible?
Changing the color of the font.
I mean,
Well,
the ones which are commented out.
mm, okay, that might sound nice, but I'll show a example file like how it's being fetched and all. Mm, okay, where is that file? Okay, I will just go with this one. Being fetched, I guess, due to my net connection being slow there, but it's being okay. To your question, it's the content is being fetched from the examples variable. So if you want to type the examples in there, so Cobra CLI has the variable called examples, right? So we need to type in the whole examples out there. So if we want to change the font color of this, I don't
Or
think it's possible.
yeah, I can't, yeah, I'm dumbfounded. Like this is this. I don't know what to say. I'm so confused that that's a challenge. And
That's a
you
great
probably have to
challenge.
show it. If you go back to the code, can you show where this is in the and do a load diff? So you got an example. So where it says example, don't either one of two things. Don't do that. Say like make example an array. So you can have multiple and treat them individually, and then have something called an example comment that is, or make it an array where the first thing is the comment, the caption, and the second thing is the command, or like any number of things, or post processing in Jekyll, say, this is how you display it, separate that out and pull anything that has a whack in front of it, a backslash, like do that. Like, but I could be missing something. So like what?
Okay. I accept your point that I also searched in functionality where in which whether we can implement custom variables in the Cobra CLI or not. The answer is yes, we can implement, but it would take a lot of time and some wiring work to do across it. It just depends upon the config file of the Cobra CLI itself, and I need to introduce that and then use that variable like example common, and then we can use it. That would be fine, but it would take a bit more time. That's what I would say right now. Other than that, no issues on that.
Husseina, did I think you got your question answered, but
Yes.
anybody want to offer a comment or maybe offer a helping hand? Because you can do this as post-processing in Jekyll as well. Like if it's really difficult to configure Cobra. Yeah, Mario.
Aha. Well, if you ask me, I don't see much of a difference. It's just some formatting. Don't see like a lot of value. I think this looks good, unless like there's really something that I'm missing.
Yeah. I would take it one step further and say, then we probably don't need documentation at all, because the documentation is right at hand when you're using Meshery CTL. So what value is this HTML formatted version providing you?
Well, I think it's very useful when there's no familiarity with the CLI tool. So this is better than no documentation at all. Like there's some users that are very familiar with the CLI environment, and they can just use the help and then like that. like just interact with the CLI. But this is like a good starter for someone that's not that used to using that environment, but there's like some learning curve, like that, and also for people that they're familiar to certain behaviors. Um, like I don't know when there's an argument that you're passing that has a double I don't know, double dash versus a dash. I don't know, maybe they expect something different. So this like clarifies it. So like right now it looks like everything's inside our command line, right? The proposal is to add formatting, but probably the Cobra CLI is, there's like a challenge um, because of the configuration, right? So it could be like a nice enhancement, but I don't know. Like this is, I say this is okay for now, but I don't know. Anyone thinks differently? I mean, probably Cobra CLI allows such configuration, and it's just matter of taking a look. Maybe it's easy, it's just not known.
Mm, well, configuration is bit easy. Um, yes, we can customize it, but for the uh, it has some inbuilt variables like these variables use, short, long, and the example and all. So if we need to introduce some new variables for such as like introducing the command for this command alone, then we might need to introduce a new variable, which would mean introducing the variable in the Cobra CLI library as well. That's what I'm afraid of. If we are about to do
Exactly.
such
So we
thing,
would need to
then
alter Cobra CLI's source code, which is the tool used to generate these docs, right?
yes, that's correct.
Yeah, sounds like too complex. Because now we need to maintain that implementation. Like it might cause some issues, or you know, I don't know.
Yeah, Mario, since no one else is offering up feedback, I think that your last point is a good one. If the requested formatting requires is not possible as a configuration of the library, but rather requires like forking of the library, then like, whoa, that's a whole nother ball game of us not wanting to take on that maintenance. That's probably not worth it. To your earlier point about the formatting being a nice to have, I think that's a good, I agree. Like still having the CTL, the CLI commands dynamically documented that lowers the maintenance of the docs quite a bit. And if we lose a bit of formatting in that process, but gain a lot of time back on maintenance and gain accuracy of the docs, that's a fair trade. Like, I would agree. I would also answer my own question about like the value of the docs themselves. Like I totally think it's valuable to have CLI docs. My point was, if the formatting, it just looks like you're looking at the CLI, the terminal, then it's like, well, it dramatically lowers the value of actually looking at the docs. The value, I think the way that I would answer that question would be basically is not having all the dynamically documented commands, or rather just describing the fact that if you go to the top level of the reference, just describing the fact that there's 6 subcommands, each one deals with this area. The behavior of the commands is such that they take immediate effect, or the flags you have to format like this. Like I would speak to those things, but then not bother with the rest of the dynamic documentation necessarily, if it was all just in terminal formatting. Anyway, that's how I would say. And so there's a lot of good points that I think that you made. And so, yeah, if maybe just to move on, since we talked about it enough, if I'll propose this alpha, if you would just if you would take a moment to examine whether or not that's within a configurable range of the Cobra library. If so, give it a shot. If it isn't, take a look at post-processing in Jekyll. Give that a shot if you would. Just determine what would be the command signifier, if it's a \\/ or whatever, and use that as the caption. And if that turns out to be arduous, then just press forth with the formatting as is. And to Mario's point, file an enhancement request for formatting, afterwards.
Okay,
If
I will
that's
look on
okay.
it. Yeah, sounds good.
There seems to be some add template funk, kind of like passing the function, apply some style. It's not as per the issue that was shared by, who was it, Gaurav? That might be good to look. It's like a close issue.
Cool. So good. So good. So I'm just going to try configuration of Cobra to try post-processing in Jekyll. And then Alpha, did you want to talk about the SMP GitHub action?
Yeah, it's just a bit of a discussion topic though, not just like a work. Anyway, I'll just share my work done so far and ask some queries.
Okay, maybe. Okay, let's maybe if you don't mind, given that might take a bit, can we? I want to make sure we hit Husseina and Sikranda's topic,
Yeah, okay, fine.
if that's all right. And
Okay,
so,
fine.
nice. And so actually, I think that means Husseina and Hamza are up.
Hi everyone. So, Chief Hamza has been working on this, so let me pull up his change set. Give me 1 second. Hamza, feel free to jump in. So this is for system config EKS. So we have a command from AWS, which is what we want to replace. So let me share that as well. Yeah, we are basically trying to replace this part of the code with programmatic way of getting the EKS config in the utils.config path. So this is the way suggested by one of the AWS developer who is working on AWS SDK. So we have followed the same thing. So let me So share this code. So basically, following that Stack Overflow command, code snippet, Hamza has come up with this. So we create a session and we get the cluster details and we fill in the certificate data. So this is important for us to be present in the kubeconfig file. And in a couple of weeks back, we discussed about not overwriting the existing kubeconfig. So for that, what Hamza has done is he has taken a backup of the original config, and he will overwrite the system's, I mean, Meshery's kubeconfig file with this whatever config we read based on the cluster name and region. So this function we have put it in mesh kit so that it can be used by the Meshery CTL. So I think Hamza is only stuck in verifying this part of the code because of the in EKS cluster. So what he is having is from the command line, he is trying to execute this code in the sense that it's not in cluster deployment of Meshery CTL. So he has hit an issue with opening up the Meshery UI. So so that is something which he's stuck with. So I suggested we can actually run Meshery CTL inside the cluster itself. So I tried doing it. It seemed to have worked. I mean, in the Cloud Guru account, whatever we spin up the EKS cluster. So I think this is good to go for now. And after that, we have other two things as part of this.
Okay, Hussaina, first hold on a bit.
Yeah.
About that EKS, also we had spoke of getting a common folder or a common directory, probably in the .meshery folder, where we can dump those archives. I had made the file name to include a date and time of when that archive was made, so that the users can easily find which config was archived when. But
Yes,
also,
yes, yeah.
I have included it in the comment in the PR. Like we need a common directory or folder inside .meshery where we can
Yeah,
be
we
dumping
usually use home directory, Meshery, and then we create folders and files there. So I think we could use the same path. I have seen that you have used temp, right? So also we have to be careful about running this on Windows-based systems because file paths, we have to consider the backslashes of Windows also. So, I mean, those are minor things, but the idea of archiving the existing config is clear, right? So,
yeah, so apart from that, I think we are just left with writing the unit test for that function, and then it will be good to go, I think.
yes, yeah. So I think we do not have a framework in place as of now for that, but I think we should come up with a proper framework for all these platforms. Then I believe we would be adding into Meshkit even for GKE as well as AKS. So I'll give a brief update about what is in store for GKE as well as AKS. GKE, it is pretty straightforward. So as per this article, we can use this code snippet, but the only thing we have to make change is that here they are returning all the cluster configs, but maybe we have to filter out whatever cluster we are interested in by taking the cluster name also as input instead of just project ID, and return the kube config. We need not even do this part. So, and one prereq for this is that we need to be authenticated using Google Cloud credentials. So I think we have to either assume that it is done, because I do not see in the current design whether we are authenticated to Google Cloud or not. Yeah, I don't see any command which makes sure that we are authenticated to Google Cloud here in any of these commands that we have. So I think earlier also it was an assumption, I feel. So if not, I think we have to do some investigation into this as well, because there are some service account creation and the rest of the stuff which we don't have here. So we just go with default values. So I believe here.
Yeah, in this approach and leveraging this sample code, it sounds like Meshery CTL would still have an external dependency on the G Cloud CLI.
Yes.
Okay. Is that?
I mean for authentication related, right? So I didn't see anything to do this programmatically. Otherwise, we have to do something with respect to that. So.
Sorry to interrupt. Sometimes
because we
there
have
is.
to,
Go ahead.
yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. So sometimes there are a specific like tokens. I mean, not tokens. Well, yeah, tokens, but like a service principal. And in order to connect to it, uh, when there's a certain environment variable defined, so the name of the variable is predefined by this in this example, the GCP CLI tool. But on Azure, that's what happens. You just define like a variable, and then the other commands by seeing that
Yes,
variable, they take
yeah,
the
yeah.
service
So
principal.
once you authenticate, usually they set some environment variables, right? Like even in AWS also that happens, I guess, right? So yeah.
Okay.
But
I mean, but we should be able to define that variable like just in the same CLI environment, and then without doing the offlogging that way, because this is usually used in automation environments. So what I'm trying to say is that either that's the way, but there should be a predefined way of doing this programmatically. Else, yeah, it wouldn't be fit for automation use. And they're main providers, so like there should be some way to avoid
yes.
invoking this.
Yeah.
But this can be invoked programmatically, right, or not? I mean, what's the challenge following?
No, actually, we don't want any dependency on G Cloud also, right? G Cloud CLI also. So we have to find a way to do this programmatically. So using actually one of this, right? So maybe one of the, maybe I don't have the proper auth related functions. So maybe in GKE some auth related APIs would be there. So we might need to use those APIs to authenticate first, and then go ahead with this fetching the project and filtering out what cluster we are interested in, and get the config from that.
We want the kube config, right?
Yes, yeah. So here we, based on the project ID, like with the project ID, we could have multiple clusters, right? So we would be interested in only one or two clusters, whichever is needed, right? So maybe we can just filter it here.
And this is for like a shared cluster, or does like this is for CI/CD, right? For your GitHub workflow, correct? Or not?
No. Actually, this is for running Meshery's. I mean, trying to connect to a cluster running outside of our local box, right? I mean, connecting to a Kubernetes cluster in Google Cloud.
Okay, I got it. So this is like just to interface a Meshery server, right?
Yeah.
To a
Yeah.
GK cluster.
Right.
Okay.
So the requirement here is that we should be having the credentials to connect to it. So the auth credentials and all that. So that should be fetched from the GKE cluster and written into a kubeconfig file. So that would be similar to what Hamza has done for AWS, right? So this kubeconfig that we get out of this, so this API config it is now. So we have to write it into a Meshery directory kubeconfig file, so that we will not get it again and again by connecting to the cluster. So we can use those credentials from this kubeconfig file and connect to this cluster.
Nice. So let me. There's a couple of links that have been put into the meeting minutes that might be helpful in terms of using, Golang samples to auth users to GCP, which might be helpful, might not. Hopefully, so yeah. Husseina articulated the goal accurately. That if possible, and we feel like it's a sustainable approach, it would be good to eliminate the need for the user to have G Cloud as a CLI. Like eliminate external dependencies is really helpful to guaranteeing that a particular command will execute without hiccup. It's also not only lightens the burden on individual users for making sure that their machines have those CLIs. You can, by the way, you can mostly expect that they probably would. If they're using GKE and they're interacting, they probably have G Cloud. So it's not like it's not a weird requirement to have, but to the extent that Meshery CTL is used programmatically, like in a workflow or somewhere else, not only is it convenient for users, but it's also quite nice for those workflows to not have to maintain external third-party auth. And so that's in part what Husseina and Sekrunda are chasing after.
Yes. So the Azure part, actually, I'm finding it very difficult to find out the equivalent of get credentials. AZ Azure subcommand get credentials, and looks like this CLI code is in Python, but I'm not able to find out the target of this commands also. So the get credential related code, I'm not able to get it. So I have to do more digging for it. So basically, uh,
just to make sure I have the right context,
Yeah,
you were okay.
Yeah. So this is the command we want to automate now, right? So yeah, I'm not able to find out the actual implementation of this to see like if we can write a similar code in config.go, right? So
Yeah. There is an Azure AKS Golang binding. Wait, hold
yeah,
on.
so here this is the repo I'm looking at. Actually, this Azure CLI 4 commands. So, but this is a Python code, but I'm not able to find the credential related code, how they are fetching the credentials. So that, I mean, maybe I should look at Go STPR. So, this is identity. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, this I have checked. Maybe I think I have to explore more on this.
Yeah, right. There might, I mean, yeah, I almost hesitate to mention this, but I'm going to paste like an example of at least what I think is an example of environment variables that could potentially alternatively be used in lieu of that first step of getting out, of authenticating the session or authenticating the user, getting the right, secrets in place. That
Okay.
if someone, I don't know, it's worth a thought. Like this is in part what Mario was kind of thinking about as well. Is like, it's not awkward to require that someone who wants to use Meshery CTL to interface with AKS, whether interactively or programmatically in a workflow, would have to supply, these environment variables. It's less convenient than Meshery CTL just, performing this on, in part on their behalf. I mean, they're going to have to supply this somewhere. And so, yeah, maybe it might be Hussein that it kind of is an either or, like first Meshery CTL seeks out these environment variables. If they're not, and if they're present, continues, but if not, request this information of the user. That might be a way of circumventing the need for the AZ, CLI dependency.
Can I add something?
Sure.
So I'm just a bit confused maybe, but doesn't Meshery receive like the kubeconfig for any cluster in like during setup, or like wouldn't that help like
If you are
directly
running
connect
in
to the
cluster, right?
cluster?
Inside the cluster.
In cluster, okay. So not
But this
out
would
out
be
of cluster.
right.
And can't the user just supply the kubeconfig regardless of that? Like it might be a different cluster, but I think that
Yeah, so there
Meshery
should be
context.
an out of band mechanism, right? To SCP the kubeconfig file here, something of that sort, right? So instead of that, programmatically we connect to the cluster and get the config.
Okay, so we're sure we need to interface with Azure in some way, correct?
Can you
So
repeat
we
that?
do. Yeah. So then we're completely sure we need to connect to Azure to get the kubeconfig directly, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I have an example of Terraform, like not a quick, like a code sample. but Terraform CLI works in similar way as we're describing. But the difference is that convenience. Okay, got it, Lee. Thank you. So basically, this information, this client ID, secret, and everything, this is supplied in a file. So it's a TCL or .tf, Terraform configure infrastructure as code file. It's supplied into this provider block. So we could do something similar, maybe. Not sure if in a pattern file, but the difference is that Terraform generates infrastructure. So it creates a cluster and everything. We're not doing that. We're just connecting to it. But I don't know. What about having that info passed in a pattern file, maybe? So the Meshery
Yeah, I
pattern
think that's
file
what.
got it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what he is suggesting. Like if we don't have this environment variables already set, we should ask the user. Otherwise, I mean, we try to connect to the cluster, right? So, and
Yep.
also with Terraform, right? Terraform, if it is installed, we can do Terraform view or something like that, right? Which could get all these values also, right? If we had deployed using Terraform, we could use it. But again, it adds another dependency on Terraform, right? So we don't want any more
dependencies. Yeah, sure. Yeah, the idea is that, well, what is the alternative? So then we need to, I mean, we're not, okay, got it. I thought this was for CI/CD, but it's not. So yeah,
But-
maybe not use Terraform, but just based on what they're doing, like that behavior, it's helpful just to have a pattern file, or maybe through the Meshery CLI, just receive these values, or maybe Meshery CTL can look for them in the environment. If they're there, like if they're predefined somewhere in the current CLI environment, just use them. If not, return an error that they need to be defined. Because we don't want to couple with Azure, but we want to enable that, and it's perfectly acceptable, to because else how could the connection be established, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, Lee, I'll try running that.
Also, probably taking a look at the Terraform code and see how they implemented it, because it's also written in Go. Though that might be a time sink, but it might be worth it to see how they implemented this particular part of getting the
Totally, yeah.
If
At
they
least
have
have an example. Sure, because they connect with a lot of different providers, and it's really reliable. Maybe not for like they don't do the same thing as us, but there is some level of interfacing with cloud providers, and it's a pretty seamless experience. So we could do something similar as to what they do in their Golang Terraform providers. I mean, it's implemented in Go. So yeah, that I agree.
Oh,
Taking a look.
okay. Yeah, that would be good to look at actually. Yeah, thanks, Mario. Yeah, you can check
Thank you.
that.
That's nice. Yeah, sometimes the examples like that one or another system, sometimes they're quite helpful in terms of like sample code, or in terms of sample code. Other times they're quite helpful in terms of user experience. And in either way, they set precedent, or they're good to look at.
Yeah, they're also like a point of comparison for the user. Like, what do they expect? What's acceptable for them?
Yes, like we have Meshery CTL system login first, right? So similar to that, like, I mean, if we can ask the user to do GCP login first, and yeah, we can think around those lines also for user experience, right? So yeah.
Well, you're right. You're right. Even Terraform, like if you do an like AZ CLI login, it's kind of like the Terraform CLI picks it up, like it grabs that information. Yeah, like you don't need to do anything else. Or else maybe you're not Azure AZ CLI logged in, but when the Terraform config file for your infrastructure, it has the secret and the client ID, and it just takes it from there as well. Actually, that's like the takes precedence because it is supposed to help you like build your infrastructure. So that's kind of like utilized. So since it's defining a file, you don't have to repeat it once and like every time. Like that's not desirable. Like if that's like an alternative, I mean that's okay. But if there was a way, it could be some kind of like some file, some configuration where it's predefined. Like it'd be neat if Meshery CTL could like just reuse that every time. Less actions from the user needed, you know.
Yep. And then at some point, yeah, at some point we end up, if I, I have to, I hate, well, geez, I would say if I came to the project for the first time today and, well, I might say that, geez, you're almost trying to make it too convenient for the user. Like you're almost bending over backwards to not have people just do what is normally expected of them, which is if you want to interface with a different system, provide the credentials to that system. And there's a little bit of legwork for them to do. And so I only mention that to have it in the back of our minds that if it starts to get uncomfortable, how far backwards we're bending.
Yeah.
And it's what Secrunda and Husseina are doing is improving upon kind of a weak set of scripts and reliance on third-party CLIs that we have today. Historically, and even for Mario, when you were first getting set up with Minikube, you're bumping into these issues of like kube config being ill-formatted or not being accessible, the kube API based on networking, what have you. Like these are issues that people do stub their toe on. So we are putting forth engineering calories, if you will, toward improving the experience. And for my part, I hope that it's the right investment and that the opportunity cost that's lost on, like, instead building out some very novel capability, I hope that we're making the right trade-off. Like, so Husseina, I say this to say, like, hey, look, some of this, you might curtail some of this and choose to dig into a different feature theme. Like, hey, if you only carry the ball, if you only make it to the 50-yard line or whatever, like, you probably won't hear anything, because I'm already.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm excited by what's been done with the EKS already. So it's good.
Yeah, and how for Azure? How is this today? Like, is there some document where the user can just reference and maybe we're just linking like what step they need to do to get the kube config and just like what's the inconvenient current way? How acceptable it is today? How painful it is for a user? Like, oh, okay, got it. I'll take a look. Thanks.
Yeah. There's the doc, and then as they step through that command, the Meshery CTL system config, it asks them questions. It's a guided tour. We're just trying to improve the.
Yeah, like less steps needed. Okay, got it. Just to. But this is just a one-time, right?
Yep.
Or every time they try to.
Every time they bring up a new cluster.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, conceptually one time, every time that they bring up a new cluster. And Hussein,
They could write their own scripts and then just apply
yeah, they can follow like
the value.
yeah, it's actually acceptable today. Actually, Mario, I think you're missing a lot of context. Like if you haven't run the system config command and if you haven't read this doc, like yeah, you'll do because you've got some good points, and they'll be even better after you've dug
You're
in.
right. Yeah.
What we have today Hussein, is acceptable. It's Hussein. I wonder. There's something in Meshery that we don't have very well. We don't have it, which is we have these connections, but we don't necessarily have a lot of CRUD around them or CRUD around the individual integrations, like or around credentials in specific. So my point is like, oh, could you enter it? Like a different approach to this is to get Meshery stood up. Maybe it's not connected to Kubernetes yet or to AKS yet, but if you were to come in here and say, oh, yes, I have an Azure credential, I have an AWS credential, I have a such and such credential. Like we can keep credentials, and then actually a lot of the rest of the flow, we eliminate that first step of having to auth, and then a lot of the rest of just using their SDKs becomes, considerably easier. And so, food for thought. I was just suggesting that we create a couple of structs, a new like credential struct for Meshery itself, or a new like connection struct, because we've got enough of them between all of the adapters for Prometheus, Grafana, Kubernetes, different Kubernetes running in different providers. The other components here, it's like, whoa, they all have commonality in terms of where they are, credentials used to interface with them, their status, whether or not we want them to be active or inactive, maybe want to remove them. And if we take a step back, like it's very clear that not only is there such a thing as a credential, which is a standalone static, but also then a credential that's used in a connection, and it may be used across multiple connections. So you might have the same AZ credential that's used for 15 different clusters. And so, my point is, if your back starts to get kinked as you lean backward, as you're bending over backwards, trying to make it easy in Meshery CTL, maybe we should pivot a little bit and make some good core constructs that, to your point, Hussein, and one of the things or whoever said it was like, it might be that you can use this UI, this client, or Meshery CTL as a client to provide your AZ credentials, to provide your AWS credential, your GKE credential, and those are stored as their own records. And from there, the rest of interfacing with them becomes really easy too. So.
Actually, I wanted to add one more point here, right? So saving those credentials would be like too much of a burden on us also, right? Like, what if they get leaked or so we have to consider that as well, right? So.
Oh yeah, like the security. Then they should be
Yes.
encrypted, or that's an attack surface totally.
Yeah, and I totally agree. 2 years ago, we decided to try not to retain their kube config and the reality is we passed that. Like this is management software that even if we were transiently holding your like we're in that boat, we're in that no matter what there's no denying that. Yeah. So we may as well embrace and say, wait, let's stop trying to ignore it and just embrace it and make some hard statements about where this is stored, how it's encrypted, because we're there. Like that kube config it's a weapon, it's a credential just like any of the rest. And so, and then we empower Meshery on behalf of that kube config to do whatever. And so, yeah, it's a great point. And I hadn't seen all the design spec notes, and so that's really encouraging to see the design spec that you were sharing. Gosh, I want to propose that core concept of a credential, or that core concept of a connection, and because I think it furthers what you're doing and is really needed.
Yes.
So nice. Anything else that we should talk about? If no one else opens an issue, I'll probably, please do this. I'm not saying that I want to. I'm saying if no one else does, I'll open an issue that just says maybe we should have a new objects in our model. An object, the first one being a credential, and then it's really more of and then the second one being being a connection. Actually, I don't like that. The connection is more of a transient. It's an interconnection between credential as a noun and then component or system, that the thing that links the two is the connection, like is a credential connected to, I don't know, we have to think, just the word connection. Like,
what about cluster secret?
Here's the problem is it could represent any of these things. It could represent a Meshery adapter, Prometheus, Grafana, Jaeger, like any number of, yeah. So if there's, we could just use the word connection because it could just mean, entity, system, entity, host, like there's, and so anyway, and then we just have a relationship between credential and connection. But that's totally open for whatever you guys want to. I cut off Husseina. What were you gonna say?
Should we call it a session kind of thing, or I mean, I just wanted to. Did session make sense?
I think that it could, to the extent that that it ends up being the mapping thing to system under management, or like another word for it is, element. Managed element is another kind of generic word for component, like managed element, a managed Prometheus, like, yeah, I don't know. Session definitely has a time-based. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of management systems will work just like this. They'll say, you'll deploy the management software, and some of them do a lot better than others, but it might sit here sort of dumb for a while until you say, okay, I'd like for you to discover my environment. Like I would like to manage some stuff. That's what you're supposed to do. So why don't you connect to things, figure out what's there, and you let me know how healthy it is, what I can do, what I can do with the software. So a lot of them will say, okay, well, to start as part of the connection wizard, which is something that we removed recently, but it would say, great, pump in your credentials. Like what systems do you want to connect to? Give me your credentials, give me. And then the better management pieces of software will say, okay, thanks, great, I've got that. Give me 5 minutes, give me 2 hours, whatever. It'll go use those credentials against it'll go use those credentials to go discover the environments, bring back a bunch of data. And it may ask qualifying questions like, oh, this AZ credential, we found 15 Kubernetes clusters. Did you want to manage all of them, or just, which ones? And so it might ask a qualifying question like, okay, just those 3, and then it continues. And so I don't know, honestly, that's such a standard thing to do. I don't know why. I think it's for wanting to avoid secrets and being responsible for secrets that we didn't necessarily take that approach. Like I said, we don't have a choice. We have to be responsible for secrets. We can't otherwise manage things. And so treating them as like not first class entities isn't good.
Yeah. So you just described it like a wizard to set up a new cluster.
Yeah, we had one in the past, not to set up a cluster, but to establish to set up your Meshery deployment, to get Meshery deployment all configured and connected.
Mhm.
So
Got it.
I'll send you a link to the connectivity wizard that we had in the past. I was using that as an example of a reinforcing example of when it is that you'd commonly find management software asking for credentials during an initialization wizard.
Yeah, like onboarding some new.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So,
Cool.
man, this is great. I'm really, pumped about this. Hussein, great update. Sequanda, you guys are doing good things.
Thanks.
Yeah. Here, I thought you were just being, lazy. I just thought that's what was going on, but I'm totally kidding. I just like, it's so great to hear your voices on the call, really. Somebody else said that they learned a few things as you were going over it. So it's good. Catch you guys later.
Yes, bye. Have a good day. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, Rohit.